Hey everyone, welcome back to the Workplace and Apprenticeship 10 videos. In this video, we're going to look at lesson 3 from chapter 7, which is talking about the cosine ratio. So the second trigonometric ratio that we will study is called the cosine ratio. And we're going to use this ratio when we're working with the adjacent side and the hypotenuse in a right triangle. So the cosine ratio states that the cosine of some angle theta is equal to the length of the adjacent side divided by the length of the hypotenuse. So we're talking about the adjacent side, so that is the side that is next to the angle that is not the hypotenuse. So I always find it easiest to label all the other sides and leave the adjacent till last. So say if we're looking at this triangle down here in the bottom left here, so say we had the angle in the bottom. So we have angle theta, and so the side that is adjacent to is right next to the angle. So it could be either this side down on the bottom, or it could be this slanted side going up and down here. Now you know it's not this slanted side because this one here is your hypotenuse. So if it's not this slanted side, your adjacent has to be this bottom side going left to right. So do you see how it, if you were to draw a line with your hypotenuse and your adjacent side, that should connect and create that angle theta. So then obviously your other side would have to be your opposite. So if it makes your life a little bit happier, you can label your opposite and hypotenuse first, and then obviously the last one there will have to be your adjacent. But as long as you remember that adjacent means next to or right beside, then you know that your adjacent is going to be that side right beside your angle. So say if we're talking about our angle is up top here. So if we're going to label the hypotenuse first, it's going right across from that 90-degree angle, and then it is the other side. Your adjacent is the other side that is not your hypotenuse. So your adjacent in this case is going to be going up and down. So it's one of those sides that touches or creates that angle and is not the hypotenuse. So once again, just like what we saw in the last video, depending on where your angle is going to determine where your adjacent, where your hypotenuse, or if we're working with the sine ratio, where that opposite side is. So now we're going to look at an example from your notes, which is number 2, where we're actually going to use the cosine ratio to find a missing angle. So here we're going to find the angle B, and we're going to round it to the nearest whole degree. So step number 1 here is that we're first going to label the sides of our triangle, because we know that with the cosine ratio, that's equal to your adjacent over your hypotenuse. So just to make sure you get your sides labeled correctly, or make sure you put your numbers in the right place, it's always really important to label that triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to first start by labeling the hypotenuse. It's one of our easiest to figure out. So that goes across your 90-degree angle. So here's your hypotenuse. And then this side, BC here, is part of that angle, or it's creating it. So this one here is going to be your adjacent. So then I'm going to fill in all my information. So here I have the cosine. And in this case, if you want to change theta to angle B, since it's stated that the angle is that in the question, we can write it as cosine B is equal to, so it's your adjacent, which is 7.6, over your hypotenuse, which is 12.0. Now I know right now your instincts are telling you right now to divide these two numbers. So go 7.6 divided by 12. But one thing I'm going to caution you against is that I don't want you to have any rounding errors. So what I would actually recommend doing is leaving it as it is. And so what we're going to do instead is we're going to move this cosine over. And so this one here is going to be a little bit trickier just because you haven't been shown this yet. But just like adding has an inverse operation, which would be subtracting, and multiplying has dividing, so cosine also has an inverse operation. So the opposite of cosine is what we call cosine inverse. So when we're trying to move this cosine to the other side, I'm literally going to rewrite this as b is equal to, so cosine inverse of whatever's on this right hand side, and I'm going to put that in brackets. So you have 7.6 over 12.0. So just to recap, so cosine, the opposite operation is cosine inverse. And if you guys look at your calculators, typically when you find your cosine button, if you look right above it, usually in a different color, is cosine to the -1. So this here, cosine inverse, is your opposite operation. So sometimes your calculators will give you a little cheat sheet way of remembering what that inverse operation is. So when we're trying to solve for b here, we have to be very careful also that with our calculators, we have to make sure we're working with degrees. So what you should see on your calculator is a capital D, or maybe even a capital DEG. If it says R, or radians, or G, or gradians, then you're working with the wrong units. And you need to figure out on your calculator how to switch it back to degrees. If you guys can't figure it out, come see me in class. But typically it's usually some sort of button labeled DRG, or there's an arrow sign. But all of your calculators are a little bit different. So you might have to sit down and take a second to find it. If not, just come see me and I can help you out as well. So then when you're putting this value into your calculator, you're going to go cosine inverse, which is typically second function cosine, and then open up a bracket, go 7.6 divided by 12, close your bracket, push equals. Now you also have to watch out because some calculators are a little bit different. Sometimes with some calculators, they're a little bit backwards. We're going to have to put this fraction in first and then push the second function cosine. So it's going to be really important that you guys work with the same calculator this whole unit, because they'll all be a little bit different. So when you put this into your calculator, you guys will find that cosine inverse of 7.6 divided by 12 is 50.7, but this question here wants us to round to the nearest whole degree, so 50.7 rounds up to 51 degrees. You also need to make sure you guys write your units there with angles. It's always in degrees. If you don't state any units, like this little degree symbol, that actually means it's in radians, and that's something that we touch on when you get to your grade 12 math. So it's really important, because then if you don't say anything like that little degree sign, then we can start to assume it's some sort of other units. So I know that might sound a little bit petty to you or nitpicky, but it actually means something else, and that might make a little bit more sense if you guys take the Pre-Calculus 30 class. But anyways, so that's everything here for this video. So if you guys have any questions, make sure to come see me in class or text me on Remind 101. And thank you guys so much for watching.